And we are live. Have a great meeting, guys.
Good afternoon. Thank you for tuning into our live stream. This meeting is part of the community engagement for the agreements elected council made with Brant Aggregates Limited. I'm just going to briefly pull up the location of the quarry site so you can be familiar with where it's located exactly. So you can see it there, just southwest of Hagersville. I'm just going to scroll down to show you a bit better view of it right here. So that's property there within the red line is what we're discussing today. So as noted, so Brant Aggregates is wishing to restart a pit that a predecessor company was operating. It's generally basically going to be the same kind of operation that it was before temporarily closing in the early 2000s. As mentioned in the earlier engagement, there's almost 4,000 quarry pits in Ontario, and hardly any of them provide any remuneration to First Nations. So I'm going to start, reading some of our prepared answers to questions we've received both at the in-person meeting and over email. And after that, if you have any questions, please don't hesitate to ask them. So what is an aggregate? Aggregates are mined resources used for construction: sand, crushed stone, and gravel. How long have aggregate pits been operating in Ontario? We don't know. First Nations operated the first quarries, but they didn't have the same form or function that aggregate pits have today. Some claim the first settler-operated aggregate pits date from the mid-1600s. How are aggregates and mining different? Aggregate operations and mining are functionally the same. It's all mining. But governments have created a regulatory distinction. In Ontario, aggregate activity is regulated under the Aggregate Resources Act, while other mining falls under the Mining Act. At the end of the day, aggregate pits are basically mining operations with less stringent environmental protections and a lower duty to accommodate First Nations. How much does Ontario and other First Nations get? Ontario receives around 5 cents per ton. Saugeen Ojibwe Nation, which had a favorable 2017 court ruling against the Ontario government, receives the same amounts the province does. So typically between 4.5 and 5 cents. We also know that there are some First Nations who receive money for aggregate operations on Crown land, but we don't know how much money they receive. Are you relying on the company to tell us how much aggregate is being mined? No, we're not relying on the company's information. There is a clause in the agreement which allows the provincial ministry overseeing aggregates, the Ministry of Natural Resources and Forestry, or MNRF for short, to provide tonnage information directly to council. The province and municipalities also use those ministry numbers to ensure that the amount of money they're receiving is correct. What is an environmental enhancement? There's a lot to unpack here. It seems like a pretty straightforward question, but at the base level, it's anything that improves the natural environment. So replacing invasive species with non-invasive species, removing asphalt to plant trees, or simply a bat box, that sort of thing. But the aggregate industry, often with the MNRF, that's Ministry of Natural Resources and Forestry, in agreement, they argue that every aggregate pit results in environmental enhancements. That's partly because some companies increase the size of an existing woods or wetland to compensate for the damage they're doing, but largely because of the rehabilitation which takes place after a quarry has been exhausted. The Consultation and Accommodation Process Team, also known as the CAP team, often disagrees with these points of view. Artificial wetlands, for instance, are simply not as effective as natural wetlands and might require regular human intervention to survive. Our rule of thumb is believe nature is nature. That's the best way to go. The CAP team is more sympathetic to environmental enhancements on previously disturbed lands, like the agricultural fields in former aggregate pit, where Brant Aggregates is proposing to quarry. Post-quarry rehabilitation there will include meadows, woods, wetlands, and ponds. Is it federal or provincial responsibility to legislate? Aggregates fall under Ontario's jurisdiction. Why only 10 cents? Because the agreement has the Six Nations of the Grand River elected council receiving 10 cents a ton, which adds up to 1.4 million over the course of the agreement. Answer is the MNRF has stated that they will not hold back any permits required by aggregate companies if the aggregate company refuses to accommodate Six Nations of the Grand River. This agreement will hopefully set a precedent and other aggregate companies will follow suit. If when that happens, more negotiations will happen. And the CAP team would look for additional benefits, including environmental protections, cost of living allowance provisions, and that sort of thing. There would be over $40 million of annual revenue if elected council receives 10 cents a ton for all aggregate operations on treaty territory within a couple hours drive of the reserve. Where will the money go? The recommendation will be that the money goes to one of the priorities identified by the community in the community survey, and more on that later. The top three priorities that have been identified to us so far are water, roads, and housing. Other notable feedback we received asked that the money be put towards the language school. How deep are they digging? Down to 204 meters above sea level. To put that in more understandable terms, our land use officer compared the above sea level of Hagersville with the proposed quarry, making the approximate depth 45 meters below the ground. How far down is the water table? The groundwater table varies from approximately 217 meters above sea level in the northeastern portion of the site to 215 meters above sea level in the southwestern portion of the site. What are some environmental effects of blasting? The chief ones are noise, dust, and vibrations. Berms will be constructed to suppress the blasting noise, dust, and vibrations. An expert's blasting report, which is required of all aggregate operations using blasting, concluded that the quarry can be developed safely. Once the quarry starts production, monitoring will take place to ensure that the blasting is as safe as predicted. How are below water quarries different? Well, there's two primary things. One is dewatering. A below water table quarry will periodically require what's dewatering. So generally pumping out or draining water in the pit. In this case, dewatering looks like it will be very limited. The hydrology report says that dewatering will only occur in high intensity storm conditions. So we're likely talking one or two such events this year. That the dewatering aspect of the quarry application also has to go to the Ministry of the Environment, and the Brant Aggregates will be seeking the required permits there. And we will be looking at the permit and approval process as that happens. There's just a couple more things. One thing I just want to highlight is that if there's any questions, and the like to email lrcs@sixnations.ca. So that's Larry, Rachel, Cindy, Sandy @sixnations.ca. And I'd like, a couple other members of my team will be also talking about aspects of the quarry project and also available to answer questions. So I'd like to introduce them at this time. Taylor?
Good afternoon. I'm Taylor Hill. I am the Assistant Director of Lands and Resources with Six Nations of the Grand River Elected Council.
Lauren J?
Good afternoon. My name is Lauren Jones. I am the manager of the Six Nations Wildlife and Stewardship Office.
Lauren V?
Hello, everyone. My name is Lauren Vanderlingen, and I am the assistant at the Wildlife and Stewardship Office.
Dalen?
Hi, I'm Dalen G. I'm a land use officer for elected council.
And I am Peter Graham, consultation supervisor for elected council. And also with us is Don Russell, our consultation administrative assistant. And I think, Lauren, was there an aspect or two that you were going to comment on?
Yeah, thank you. So you've already kind of touched on the above the water table, below the water table. What you said is exactly right. If it goes below the water table, and according to the hydrological reports, it does differ how often you would have to dewater. It's something that is heavily regulated by the MECP, and there has to be a whole other process to allow for permits for that. The other question we got was revolving around aquatic life. So I actually went back to the document. Generally speaking, terrestrial was pretty well handled. There's a pretty substantial woodlot that is going to be remaining intact. They're not touching it at all, along with a snake hibernacula as well that they are not touching. For aquatic life, they did make multiple visits to this site, including looking for fish habitat and doing turtle surveys. Within all of these visits, no turtles were found either within the entire drainage area or within the area that they will actually be carrying out project activities. For fish, they did find some brook stickleback within the entire drainage area, which is a fish that is quite common and can survive in a whole lot of different environments and is found pretty much everywhere. And there was no fish whatsoever found within the area that the project activities are slated to take place. This also isn't particularly surprising. There's not really any natural water bodies in this area. It's mostly just human-made type drain situations. But this is definitely something that we look out for, and didn't really, yeah, that there's not much else to add there. So yeah, please let me know if I forgot anything.
Right, and just before I check to see if there's any questions, Taylor, can you tell us about the survey?
Yes, I can. So there is a survey. You can still fill that survey. If you like a copy, you can either email at the email Peter said, or you could drop by the Lands and Resources Department. There is a $10 Tim's gift card if you fill it out while supplies last. So please just bring it in, and you receive that. As always, if you please feel free to answer the questions or write as many comments as you want on the survey.
Thank you. And again, that email address is lrcs@sixnations.ca. Do we have any questions?
I'm not seeing any, Peter.
Why don't we wait a few minutes to see if there's any coming?
I have one thing to add just to what Peter was saying, how the water table is like in Hagersville is roughly about 217 meters above sea level in Hagersville, because it's like there's a lot of porous space. Like the reason why they're mining there is because there's a lot of sand and stuff available. So there's a lot of porous space in the ground, meaning that the water is able, like the water table is able to fluctuate like several meters in a day. And like depending on the time of year, the weather, etc., like the water table could really be fluctuating like tens of meters in a day. It's not like 217. It's not like a hard number where the water table stays. It's constantly fluctuating.
Thanks, Dalen. I actually didn't know that.
Okay, we have two questions. First one is I'm wondering where to find project information.
Yeah, with respect to the answer to that first question, project information, there isn't the full collection of technical documents online, unfortunately. But we'd be very happy to share those with anyone who's interested. So if you can, if you could get in touch, either call the Lands and Resources Department or use that lrcs@sixnations.ca. We will ensure that a hot link is created, some means that you can easily access those documents without having to leave your home.
Another question, Peter, is have we already accepted this offer?
We've tentatively accepted the offer. Council's approval is subject to the community engagement process. So council will be looking at the responses received before actioning the agreement.
Another question is how long has the community engagement process been ongoing? So I guess, Peter, if you could say when it started.
Yes, unfortunately, I don't have the date with me offhand. I believe it started early September, mid-September at the latest, and it will continue until October 19th. I don't know if anyone has more exact information.
Yeah, Peter, we started at the AGA, which was August 24th. And then it was advertised. No, and then we have another question. Can you speak more to why aggregates meet a lower standard of accommodation?
Yeah, I don't know if anyone can add to this. This is, it's a bit speculative. But number one, as mentioned, there's almost 4,000 pits. So there's a lot more aggregate pits, than there is mining pits. Substantially, a lot of these pits are located in Southern Ontario, right? Because they have to be located in close proximity to where all the development's going on. And, Six Nations, is right in the thick of that there. I believe the distinction, was made just to make life easier for quarry operators, having less environmental compliances to worry about. So they do not have to the same degree as a mine under the Mining Act, have thoroughly deep consultation with Six Nations. So bottom line, aggregates are being treated differently because they're in Southern Ontario, which is close to the power of where political power is held in the province, and they're able to get to those concessions. And with governments often having ties to the development industry, they've been keen to allow those exceptions.
I have another question, Peter. Granite and marble are non-renewable resources. Is there going to be an ongoing water and air quality test while the work is being completed?
Yeah, I mean, I can't speak to marble and the like, but as far as that the overall, I know there. If you could just repeat the part, I know what are the two factors that monitoring was being asked about?
Water and air quality.
Yes, so I know for the fact that there will be both periodic water testing and then as well as more intensive water testing right when the aggregate operation opens. For air, frankly, I can't answer that. I don't know if anyone else here will, but I'll assure you that we can provide an answer at some point. So yeah, if no one knows about the air quality monitoring, we'll get back to you on that. I understand we'll be able to ask the communications department to be able to put a response in the chat to this live stream, when we have an answer for you, which would certainly be by tomorrow.
Peter, there is a question about what treaty area it is in.
Yeah, it's in Nanfan Treaty Territory exclusively, so not Haldeman Tract.
His question is, will there be public access to the lands after the miners close or return of lands to the Six Nations?
So we don't know is the answer. Aggregate companies will kind of imply it's public usage. After all, as mentioned, they're gonna forests and wetlands and ponds. But at the end of the day, there's no guarantees what will end up happening. In theory, even though yes, the company will be doing that rehabilitation, enhancing that environment. But at the end of the day, it could become a housing subdivision or something like that. And that's something the Lands and Resources Department would have to deal with at this time. So yeah, unfortunately, no guarantees, and there is not agreement to return the land to Six Nations.
Peter, there's another question. There's two more questions. Do you believe this project, given its proximity to all the development happening within the tract, respects the spirit and intent of the moratorium on development put in place by the Haudenosaunee Confederacy Chiefs Council?
No, you look at all the developments in the Haldeman Tract. It's proceeding at pace. Bottom line is a problem stopping developments that are unwanted, or problems even maybe a development that it doesn't seem too bad, but limiting leverage as far as actually being able to change that. So as far as that moratorium you're talking about, no, it does not respect that, nor does all the other development that you're seeing around you.
Peter, did you? I think you touched upon the impacts on groundwater, or you or Lauren, but that was one of the questions.
Yeah, we touched on it in general terms. The hydrology report doesn't expect there to be any difference in well water levels and that sort of thing. If there's more particular question along those lines that occur to you now or later on, we'd be happy to answer them. I don't know if anyone else here can expand a bit. But yeah, I'll just, and sorry to belabor you with this, just, then briefly restate that one impact is that dewatering is required. In this case, it's anticipated for storm events. We'll get the final sign off. We'll know exactly what's happening once Brant Aggregates completes that process for a permit with the Ministry of the Environment. And it also has that bearing on the final rehab, right? Because below, water table quarries, for most of that portion, it basically stays water forever.
Peter, there's another question about our involvement in the rehabilitation.
Yeah, so the rehabilitation plan, it's going to be the Ministry of Natural Resources and Forestry that will be enforcing it, making sure that's the end result. We are also able to consult on that. So also, if there are any questions about that, if there's a particular form of rehabilitation that's preferred, we'll see what we can do and we'll let you know. So especially please, if you get in touch to the email, it helps. Then can ensure you get a fulsome answer.
Peter, there was a question about health effects. Did any of the reports that we received address that?
No, we're primarily, when we look at development applications, we're disproportionately looking at terrestrial and aquatic life. Where we're basically looking for cases where there'll be adverse impacts to treaty rights. We don't believe there are any special human health concerns for quarries. I mean, certainly, I know some people who live next to them will complain about dust. I guess less as a health component issue than dust on the windowsill for homes right in close proximity to the quarry. If there's any other human health aspects, I'm not aware of them.
Peter, there was a follow-up question to the groundwater question. It says, if it does impact ground levels, basically, how will Six Nations members be compensated / what happens then?
Yeah, so that's never been a process I'm involved in. I just looking at past reports for other quarries. And just in those select cases, they have not been able to find any groundwater impacts. If there is, I would recommend you contact the Lands and Resources Department, the CAP team here. That's also something that the ministry would be very much involved in. I just don't want to speculate. I don't know if they would, pause quarrying activity until, further investigations and the like. I'm not certain. I do know there will be direct ministry intervention, and it would be placed on the quarry company to remedy that. But unfortunately, I personally don't have details of that process.
Okay, I'd also like to add, if anyone has missed any of the previous answers and questions, this will be available on the Facebook page for perpetuity. So you can rewatch it or watch it at your leisure.
All right. If there's no other questions, I say there's a couple answers. We'll try getting the communications department in the next day or so to place in the chat. And again, you're encouraged to contact LRCS at sixnations.ca or just give a phone call to the Lands and Resources Department.
Peter, there's another question. Who would have details of the process to remedy contamination in groundwater?
Yeah, so after this call, I will contact the Ministry of Natural Resources and Forestry and get an answer for you that can be input into the Facebook chat.
Peter, I'm not sure if I'm sure we might have some records to this, but there's a question about if we have any studies from the impacts of the gypsum plant to compare, I guess, and on to compare lessons learned and standards. So I guess that might be one to take back.
Yeah, that's definitely one to take back. We might have that information in office. If not, I'll ensure we can get that. And separately, if you want to view any such documents, yourself that we might have that might be publicly accessible about the gypsum mine or other projects, please email and we'll get those to you.
Off the top of my head, I do know that CGC's goes down about 100 feet, which is roughly about the same as how far below the ground this quarry is going to be going.
I think it, and then just to clarify, we follow the policies of Six Nations to the Grand River Elected Council. So as such, we follow direction from them and what they would proceed. And also that includes any lateral violence policies, procedures, and protocols. There's a question for when we're bringing it forth to the elected council, and I do believe that would be the political liaison on October 23rd, that would be Monday, 2023. It begins in the morning at 9 a.m. and goes until finished.
I just looked something up in the Aggregate Resources Act. There was a question earlier about like if there was like really negative environmental effects, like what could happen. So the minister can actually suspend a license for any period of time for like any violation of the act. So that could be like any changes to like what they're doing, the site plan, environmental issues. So there's like a huge range of issues that if the license lays out and if they're not following these, then they can suspend the pit or the quarry until they are fixed.
Is there just the last check, Taylor?
Peter, I think one just came in. Oh, they asked if there's any contracting or employment opportunities written into the agreement.
Yes, the agreement does provide language about favoring consideration of potential Six Nations employees and suppliers. So regardless, whether you're coming from a potential employer or a business perspective, it'd be good to mention that to Brant Aggregates. Even better would be to get in touch with our consultation and accommodation process team. So just it really helps if they're maybe both hearing it from you and both hearing it from us, just because we're able, it's easier for us to do follow-up. And, if so-and-so, a given person wasn't choosing to be a contractor or chosen to be an employee, we would, follow up and pressure Brant Aggregates on that.
And then there was another part of that question. Has there been any consideration for negotiating return of land, such as the right of first refusal to purchase this land after the mine's lifetime?
We have had those discussions with other aggregates companies, and we've been unsuccessful on that to date. And the Brant Aggregates agreement does not include that. As mentioned, we will, continue trying to get, written, legally recognized promises to return lands after quarry operations finish. As far as the right to first, refusal on purchase, that's the kind of line that I would suspect to be relatively easy to put in future agreements.
This question might be for Lauren. Did they is this aggregate having any impact on the Carolinian forest?
Hi there. Impact on the Carolinian forest. So in terms of terrestrial impacts and impacts to terrestrial vegetation in general, there is one small woodlot, that Peter pointed out. I believe it's in the southwestern corner, but please correct me if I'm wrong. Upon noticing that there was species at risk contained within that woodlot, we did recommend that they prevent any impacts to that area. So now that area is being completely avoided in its entirety. So in short, no.
Peter, do you know part of the process there is any plans to do a health risk assessment, like either during, after, or before, normally in aggregates?
No, I'm not familiar with any such process.
Peter, there is a question about peer review.
As far as peer review goes, all aggregate companies are required to have, third-party consultants to go over hydrology, all the environmental impacts, blasting, etc. Some municipalities have their own peer review process, which is a good thing. But I don't believe Haldeman, where this quarry is located, has one. Many months ago, the CAP team decided that any future aggregate company we deal with, that as the first step in the engagement or consultation process is the aggregate company will pay for there to be a peer review at a consultant of our own choosing. So as we mentioned, that means every other pit we've reviewed subsequently is being subject to this lands and resources peer review process. One problem we have, with the status quo is, of course, everyone who is doing, the peer reviews, presently outside of that process I mentioned with the lands and resources, of course, they tend to rely on aggregate companies, for contracts. So while in theory they're all independent, not so sure at the end of the day. So that's why we launched this peer review process for other aggregate pits.
Peter, my understanding is that an environment assessment's usually always included with an aggregate application.
That's right. Everyone I have seen includes an environmental impact study.
You have to do an EIS in order to obtain a license. So even whether it was on our treaty lands or not, they still have to do an EIS to obtain a license to be able to mine.
There's a question about the moratorium, and I guess I will answer that one. And I guess to say, the CAP team is a department under the Six Nations, the Grand River Elected Council. So any direction is received directly from the council. And as such, we are following that direction. There's also a question about if it's been approved. That was previously answered, but I don't know, Peter, if you just want to reiterate that.
Yes, the agreement was approved by council, subject to community engagement. So that council political liaison meeting that Taylor was mentioning at the end of the month. So that will involve, assessing the community feedback.
Peter, I don't know if you could touch a little bit on about Brant Aggregates, I guess size, ownership sort of thing, I guess, compared to just any information on the company itself.
Yeah, the company itself, I mean, most aggregate operations we deal with are large multinationals, generally headquartered in Europe. But there's also a bunch of smaller private operations, and Brant Aggregates is one of those. I believe it's a family company. They are operating one additional pit that is now nearing exhaustion. And I believe once that pit is closed, to the best of our knowledge, this will be the only other pit by Brant Aggregates Limited. So basically they do one pit at a time versus multiple ones.
Peter, there's a question about why this is not on SN Future. And I guess I don't have access to SN Future, do you? But I guess we could.
Yeah, I don't believe that. I think that's I believe that's correct, that it is not on SN Futures. To be frank, I think SN Futures was tended to be used more heavily prior to the pandemic. And it's been spotty, I think, to say the least, as far as providing updates and information there. So it's a larger question for our department, but if I can, infer something from that question, it's yes, we should be. We will make an effort to provide more information on that website in the future.
Peter, I don't know if you just want to briefly touch on about what happens if we don't agree with it.
Yes, if we don't agree with it, the end result is it would just proceed otherwise. So basically, essentially the same pit, same quarry operation either way. It's generally whether that $1.4 million of it, whether that goes in elected council's pocket or the owner's pocket. Is that it for questions, Taylor?
I don't see any more coming in that.
Is that still the case?
I'll answer this one. There's a question about preemptive injunctions. The CAP team wouldn't make any of those decisions. That would be Six Nations, the Grand River Elected Council, the actual council itself that are making those decisions as such. They would need to answer that.
All right, Taylor, if there's nothing else on your docket at the moment, we will close the call and start investigating some of the questions we weren't able to provide complete answers for.
Okay, Peter, I don't see anything coming in.
Well, I see one question. What's the lifetime of the project?
Yeah, it's estimated the resources of the quarry will be exhausted somewhere between 20 to 30 years. Aggregate operations vary. Sometimes these pits are just sucked dry in about 2 years. But as I say in its technical documents to the ministry, they're in for 20 to 30 years.
I might have missed a question. There's a comment about that I asked a question. So if they could just resend the question. Peter, there's a question. So the 1.4 million would be over the lifespan.
That's correct, over the lifespan of the quarry. So if it's 20 years, it's over 20 years. If it ends up being opening for 28 years before closing, that's what the payments will be spread, because it's all just like the money the province gets and the municipality gets. The yearly payments are just tied to how many tons of aggregate were extracted in a given year.
Peter, do you have a rough estimate on how much altogether that the pit would make?
$14.5 million tons of aggregate.
And that's over the 20 to 30 year period?
Correct.
For anybody just joining, this will be available to watch afterwards. And the questions and answers will be watchable.
Yep, and just a reminder to check this Facebook space because we hope to have some answers inserted in the next couple of days. And again, don't hesitate to reach out to lrcs@sixnations.ca for questions, for comments, for surveys that Taylor was talking about. If you get it in, I understand by the 19th of this month, you'll also get a $10 Tim Hortons gift card.
I just saw another question come in about like kind of like general information. If you do type in on like Google or whatever, like Brant Aggregates Hagersville, they do have a website where they kind of give you like a general overview of the project. I'm not exactly sure what you're looking for, but if it's not on there, just you could reach out to that email and I'm sure we could get you those documents.
Hey, if there's no more questions, we thank you very much for tuning in today, and please keep in touch.